decide themselves in the light of whatever values they've they've got. And I don't see an objection personally to euthanasia or to not allowing deformed people to be born, but that's my personal view. I mean, other people could have other views on that, and even the question of abortion. I've come across socialists that are against it. To this thing, except now you've mentioned dialectics. Of course, no life form exists on its own. I mean, that the whole universe is one thing. We're just interactions of parts of the universe. So I mean, the whole universe is complex. Even so-called simple things are complex. But interestingly enough, this is the position taken by this group of Catholics who don't want to get involved in this creationist argument. They refute this argument from complexity by that very argument, by saying that everything is complex. As I say, as we've argued in this magazine, metaphysically speaking, contrary to fashionable reductionism, all things are irreducibly and wonderful, complex or holistic, and that certainly does not stop them being causally related across time and other things, e.g. by evolution. I mean, this in fact is they're putting a dialectical, or they're doing dialectical idealism while we're dialectical material. But I mean, what they're arguing is that what scientists are doing when they uncover, or discover, or come to conclusions about what's going on in nature, is that they're discovering, uncovering the mind of the creator. So I mean, it's a question of definitions when it comes to that. But I mean, as I said, they've taken the intelligent position of somebody that believes in a God, of not defining it in such a way that no facts can repeat it. They can just say, okay, if humans do discover how to make life, okay, that's fair. That's fair enough. You're just discovering God's plan, and it's quite a clever one. Otherwise, Father Marcosi and the others who sort of say you never tell what happened, that they will be refuted.
The only point I was going to make is that when you get this creationist argument, you sometimes find that a lot of folk are quite happy to accept that a lot of kinky aliens came along and and are bred and we're the result of it and that type of thing. And when you find that the genes, the knowledge about genes has come along, and you start using changes in the genes, maybe in animals and things like that, there's an awful lot of sort of debate about interfering with God's creation and things like that. So I just sort of like to raise that sort of point, that how they can accept one and sort of bulk, as it were, at the other.
Well, incidentally, it's not ruled out that life could have originated somewhere in the solar system and somehow ended up on Earth. I mean, that's still a valid hypothesis worth investigating. But what isn't true is what the Scientologists and the Raelians say, that some people came out of space and found apes and then manipulated their DNA, and that's how we came to be, or even interbred with us, and that's. I mean, mind you, as I said before, I think that's a materialist explanation. I mean, it's completely wrong, but it's less unlikely than some of the ones put forward in the Bible. But we don't yet know how life came into being. So I mean, maybe there will be, as I say, maybe it did arise in outer space and ended up here somehow.
Okay, George. Sorry, can I just hold you with that? Just hold that thought, Dave.
Yeah, just very briefly, just to pick up something that Gwyn was saying about, how do we explain, or how do we answer a religious person who says, or how do we get an answer from a religious person about how disease and other things can be explained, or why we get old, and so on and so forth? Well, you don't get an answer, except, it's either God's purpose being worked out, or it's a result of something that happened in the Garden of Eden, i.e. sin. And I mean, it's some time now since I read the Genesis account of creation, but I seem to recall that birds and animals and life generally were created earlier in the week. and the oceans and the sun and the moon and stars were created afterwards. Well, you know, anybody knows that that can't happen scientifically. So I mean, I just don't think that we can hope to try and have a reasoned argument with people who abandon the scientific method. You know, you're just wasting your time. If people cannot look at these things rationally and you know, use the scientific method to explain the existence of life, then, you know, we've got a pretty impossible job.
Do you want to say something about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I say, that's the argument, you know, against an all-perfect, all-loving God. You know, why is there suffering in the world? And they haven't got any answer to that except to say, but there's another being, supernatural being called the devil. Yeah. You know, but then it gets more and more complicated. So I mean, you know, there's you know, as Laplace said, he just don't have any need of this, you know, God hypothesis to explain things. But I mean, as I say, if they claim there's a perfect being, but I mean, this is on a sort of debating point level. You know, it's easy enough to refute it. I mean, well, the very fact of death and all that, and the very fact of us being here proves that you know, God can't have been perfect, because, as I say, why would a perfect being want to create an imperfect world? It shows that it's not a perfect being. Therefore, well, Sandy appreciates that.
George, would you like to?
Well, just quickly saying about that. I mean, yeah, I think it was Fred Hoyle, way back in the early 80s, or maybe a bit earlier, was talking about transpermia. You know, this idea that meteorites and comets and things like that could carry life from one planet to another, or whatever. So, or from the gaseous nebulae and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, it could have come from outer space, I suppose. And I think there's actually going to be an experiment soon. There's some kind of satellite going out to sort of test one of these ideas. But the other thing is about people who have these religious ideas. The problem we've got is it's hardwired into their identity. It's who they are. This, you know, they see God as being part of who they are. So it's very difficult to deprogram anybody with all that kind of stuff in their head, really.
Well, I mean, I don't want to deprogram. I think capitalism will you know, deprogram them. Once, when I was in Wiltshire, where they've got all these crop circles, they had a congress of people from you know, from crop circles, and I was in the queue waiting for some food, and people were talking about his car broken down. Well, he didn't sort of say, you know, I prayed to the person out of space to repair my car. They were talking about he went to the guys that had it done. So I think that these people, in their very real lives, you know, they're just as materialistic as everybody else. I mean, you know, you could be right. There's some sort of psychological reason or cultural reason why they hold these ideas, but there are very few of them that you know, apply their principles to life. I mean, as it happens, the Jehovah's Witnesses are one group that do. They refuse, you know, blood transfusions and are prepared to die rather than have you know, a blood transfusion. They also don't serve in the armed forces and things like that. And in fact, incidentally, the Jehovah's Witnesses don't care what's taught in the schools. I mean, they don't care what happens in the world, because they believe in providence, that you know, that God will provide. They try to disengage completely from the thing. So they're not campaigning in America for creationism to be taught in the schools. I mean, they tell their kids in school to say evolution isn't true, but they're not interested in politics. I hope I don't sound too sympathetic to the Jehovah's Witnesses, because we've often been called the Jehovah's Witnesses of the left.
Okay. I think at this stage now, it's coming on for 11:15. I think some of us might want to have a cup of tea together and chat over some of those ideas and some of the other ideas we've heard over the weekend. I'd also like to ask Mike to come back up, please, and say thank you.
Thanks to the other speakers as well, and to Andy and Eileen for sorting out the bar, and thanks for the sing-along last night as well. Oh no, everyone enjoyed it. Yeah, okay. So if we meet up again at about 11:30.